Forever. Dawn tries to use magic to bring Joyce back.
This episode felt like it took forever. We open with Buffy viewing a bunch of caskets with ominous music, but it turns out that she's just looking for one for Joyce.
Yeah, I thought that was a really weird fake out to stick at the beginning of this episode.
It kind of made all my fears come true that I had at the end of the last episode.
Dawn questions which one Joyce would have liked the most, but Buffy says maybe she shouldn't have brought Dawn. She shouldn't have to deal with that.
Later, Buffy and Giles are planning out everything for the funeral, and Dawn gets increasingly upset, not just about the events, but that she was left out of certain conversations, and is being left out now.
And I noticed that David Boreanaz' name was in the credits, and I started crying.
Out of joy?
Yeah. Dawn asks if she can go to Willow's after the service, and Buffy says yes. And then I have a note there that says, "Where is Glory?" They still don't seem to be taking her threats seriously. Although maybe they don't need to because she hasn't followed up on anything.
Buffy mentions that they haven't heard from her father, which I hadn't thought about, but they still don't mention Joyce's boyfriend, who just sent her flowers last episode.
Xander and Willow go outside, and they find Spike arriving with flowers. Xander criticizes him for still trying to score with Buffy, but Spike maintains that he really cared about Joyce.
So we're back to sticking Spike in at random spots, and I imagine in the last episode, there had to be at least one person who was champing at the bit just to shove Spike in there, and everyone else held them back. But after that one, that person said, okay, that episode where we tried is over, and it's been 5 minutes. Can we please just put Spike in now?
And when Spike leaves his flowers behind, Willow notes that there is no card, which I think is supposed to validate him somehow, but I didn't get that.
And I noticed Spike neglected to mention that he commissioned a Buffy sex robot.
I forgot about that.
I don't understand how we're expected to take his character seriously ever again.
Later, we see Buffy and Dawn each dealing with things on their own.
At the funeral the next day, we get all the melodramatic music that the previous episode chose not to use, and it was a great decision, so we're back to the status quo.
After most of the others leave, Tara tells Buffy that Dawn is ready to go, but Buffy says she's going to stick around, so Dawn goes with Tara and Willow.
And she stands there while the lighting changes to nighttime.
Which I thought was cool. I liked that shot.
The part I didn't like is when Angel popped up.
Oh, yes. I went from, hey, this is kind of cool, to wanting to kill myself.
So my biggest fear from the last episode, where things would just return to the status quo, was completely surpassed by throwing in this dumbass.
Willow tries to tell Dawn that things will get better, but Dawn struggles to believe that.
And even their lame jokes don't help. So we're back to making lame jokes, too.
And Dawn tells them that she wants them to help her do a spell to bring Joyce back.
Meanwhile, Xander and Anya are banging, and Anya says the whole time she's thinking of Joyce, which was a little weird, until she clarifies what she's talking about.
She says thinking about death and life has made her realize that sex is more important than she thought it was, because they can use it to make life. But then she says she's not ready to do that yet, which I thought was where it was going.
We cut back to Dawn's plan, where she makes some good points to Willow and Tara's protestations.
Magic can't be used to alter the natural order of things.
But all you do is mess with the natural order of things.
And Tara also claims that they don't mess with life and death, but I'm pretty sure they've done that.
Willow admits that she's seen stuff in books about resurrection, but Tara keeps saying that Wiccans took an oath not to do that.
And they eventually fall back to the "it's too dangerous" excuse.
Which has never stopped them from anything else before. Dawn says she thought they wanted to help her, and she shuts them out, figuratively.
At the cemetery, Buffy is scared about what comes next because it's unknown, and everyone expects her to know what to do.
She says she's not as strong as everyone thinks, but Angel assures her that she'll figure out how to handle things.
And he also says he'll stick around for as long as she wants. And I was hoping that they would do a reverse of what they did before, and all of a sudden it would change to daytime, and he would just die.
Yeah, when he said that, I started loading my gun. But thankfully, Buffy says it would be a bad idea if he stuck around.
And at this point, I was ready for either Spike to pop out of the ground, or for Riley to just land in a giant helicopter.
And then Buffy and Angel make out for like 10 minutes. And it's a good thing I had the wrong caliber ammo, because if it wasn't, I'd be dead now. But eventually, Buffy finally tells him he better go.
We cut to Ben and one of the goblins. Ben says Glory is his sister. So does that mean he also has big god powers.
I didn't know if he was being literal. We don't know how any of that actually works. So I kind of left that open for hopeful explanation later.
Yeah, we didn't get it in this episode, though.
I mean, I doubt we ever will, but we'll see.
He also lets slip that the key is a person because he is an idiot.
He very convincingly says,
When I said it's innocent, I didn't mean that the key is... It's not a person.
Of course not.
"It's not a person." I had to stop and go back because I was laughing so much. It was such a good line delivery and everything. He says he can't have the goblin going back to Glory with that information, so he stabs his ass.
And I was curious as to whether that was permanent, because Ben should have just killed all the goblins a long time ago, and then Glory would have no one to run out and do the stuff she wants them to do. She would just run out of time, sitting in a hotel room, lamenting about how nothing is happening.
I had a lot of questions about that I saved for my wrap-up. I think. I put them in here somewhere.
And I thought maybe Ben just did it to make himself feel better, and he couldn't actually kill the goblins. I had a lot of questions.
Yeah, I mean, stabbing people makes me feel better sometimes, so. The next morning, Willow tells Dawn that she and Tara have class.
And they leave Dawn alone in that absolutely massive dorm room.
And on the way out, Willow very subtly causes a book to pull itself out of the bookshelf. And Dawn finds the section on resurrection.
She makes her way to the magic shop, looking for more dangerous materials for the resurrection spell.
She checks out different books while pretending to try to help out with dusting. And Giles says they can always use another hand at the store, which leads to some funny dialogue from Anya.
But you have a hand. A paid hand. A hand that isn't the hand of illegal child labor.
Anya?
Dawn asks if there are any dangerous items that she should avoid messing with, and Giles says, all the books and potions on the top area are incredibly dangerous, so if a random person comes in wanting to buy one, she should tell Giles so he can helpfully get it down for them. A customer comes in and actually has dialogue for once, but of course, we don't see them on screen.
How may I serve? Well, I'm looking for something nice for a series.
Dawn makes her way up to the restricted section and shoves a bunch of dangerous stuff in her bag.
And of course, no one notices, despite her acting incredibly conspicuous.
Probably took acting lessons from Ben.
Later, Dawn heads out to Joyce's grave when Spike shows up.
And he tells her she should be careful because she could end up creating a zombie, but he wants to help.
Yeah, for some reason. And we cut to Giles listening to the same Cream album that he listened to with Joyce back in Band Candy, which I thought was a good callback. I'm surprised they're getting pretty good with that kind of thing.
If a little out of place in this episode at that point.
Yeah, it just felt like they kind of stuck it in somewhere.
Yeah. Spike says he won't tell Buffy, and he knows someone that could help them perform the spell. And when Dawn asks why Spike is doing it, if he doesn't want Buffy to know, instead of saying the real reason, which could be either, I have a Buffy sex robot and don't need her, or the writers need to keep me in the show, he instead says, I feel bad.
So Dawn agrees not to tell anyone. Which, I mean, I was wondering how Dawn would explain bringing Joyce back if it does work. But then I guess everybody would probably just be happy that she was back if it worked.
They would chastise her for a little bit, and then Willow and Tara would both say, damn, you're way better at magic than we are, and we do it all the time.
Glory's goblin returns to Glory, telling her that Ben is the one who stabbed him. So did Ben turn into Glory and then run past the goblin back to the hideout?
Well, the goblins always say, I'm going to run back and tell Glory. But really all they have to do is say, I'm just going to stand next to you and tell Glory.
And we saw that when Ben gave Buffy his number, it was for a phone in Glory's place. So apparently that's also where Ben lives, meaning Glory's minions are always around. Couldn't they just grab Ben when he appears and force him to do what Glory wants? Or just hold him there until Glory comes back? There are so many questions that I have, and I'm probably not going to get answers.
Yeah, it's a good thing she's the main antagonist of the season.
And Glory is excited to learn that the key is in human form. Spike and Dawn arrive at a house that's lit like an episode of X-Files. In other words, it's so dark that I can't tell what the hell is happening.
I thought the person Spike had in mind might turn out to be Ethan Rayne.
Oh, that would have been cool, but as far as we know, he's in prison.
Yeah, but he knows magic and stuff.
Yeah, that's true.
But it is some other dude instead.
This old eccentric weirdo tells them that they don't want to mess with Resurrection, but Dawn presses on.
He also asks if either of them are witches and if they have any experience, which they don't. And as he's looking for stuff, we see a tail pop out from under his robe, and he is humming selections from Peter and the Wolf.
I knew you were going to say that. I thought it was a song from The Wizard of Oz until I looked it up.
Those are two different stories, Robert.
Yeah.
You uncultured swine.
I thought it was like The Witch is Dead song, but I haven't seen The Wizard of Oz in forever, so...
Well, it's been a couple years since it came out.
The old guy says they need to steal an egg from the nest of a certain type of demon to complete the spell, and they need an image of Joyce. So he gives Dawn an incantation to read, and says the only way to reverse the spell if things go wrong is to destroy the image.
And even if things do go well, Joyce might not be the same as she was before.
But Dawn is not discouraged, so he tells them where to find the demon in the sewer. When Dawn tries to pay him, he refuses to accept it and tells her to just let him know how it goes. And when he shakes her hand, his eyes get all weird and creepy.
Spike and Dawn find the entrance to the demon nest, and Dawn insists that she's going too, despite that being a really bad idea.
The demon turns out to be a 3-headed 90s Ultraman monster, which was pretty cool and not like what we usually see in this show.
I was just surprised it was practical and not some terrible CGI.
Yeah, and when they find it, it's asleep, and instead of trying to grab the egg, they make up some excuse about not being able to get to the eggs until it moves out of the way.
So there's a big fight where Spike keeps punching it and trying to shove an axe into it, and he gets bit, and Dawn gets an egg, but she drops it, so she has to run back to get another one. It was drawn out way too long.
And I thought him getting bitten was going to result in something, but it doesn't in this episode, so I don't know if it does later. Later at the house, Dawn starts the ritual to cast the spell.
While in her dorm room, Willow is writing in a journal to keep track of everything, since Joyce's death makes her want to be able to remember everything that happens in her life.
Tara notices the missing book on the shelf and concludes that Dawn took it. But she was fine with Dawn staying there by herself, so why is she surprised that something like that happened? What an idiot.
And Willow badly conceals that she gave Dawn the book, but Tara can't put the pieces together, so maybe Dawn cast another spell that lowered everyone's intelligence too.
This entire scene was filled with bad acting and bad dialogue.
So maybe Willow took acting lessons from Ben too.
And they finally decide to call Buffy. Buffy gets the call and finds Dawn finishing the spell. She tries to tell Dawn that if Joyce comes back, there's a good chance she'll come back wrong, and they need to reverse the spell.
And as they're arguing, we see Joyce's feet walking towards the house. Dawn laments that she's all alone, and Buffy is pushing her away and treating everything like it's all some big chore. And Buffy counters that she has to keep moving because when she stops, she knows that Joyce is really gone.
She says she has to take care of everything because there's no one else to do it now. Outside the window, the shadow of Pet Cemetery Joyce walks by.
And after Buffy and Dawn both get all their feelings out there and they understand each other, Joyce knocks on the door.
Having acknowledged that she's scared and doesn't know what she's doing, Buffy's excited to have Joyce back and goes to open it, but right before she gets there, Dawn rips up the photo of Joyce, and there's no one at the door.
And Buffy and Dawn collapse and finally cry together.
Forever. Overall.
Well, I mean, it only seems like it was a couple minutes. So we immediately, at the beginning of this episode, have a bunch of the drama music, which was a clear indication of what we had returned to. Spike popped into this episode. Angel popped into this episode. We have a recycled plot about using magic to resurrect someone. I didn't really like this episode. Willow feeding Dawn's need to resurrect Joyce was not only a bad move in general, but also out of character for Willow. And the fact that she lied to Tara about it was also out of place. And if Tara finds out, which she should have from Willow fumbling around for 10 minutes straight, that's going to end poorly for their relationship. Things moved very quickly in this episode, too quickly, to the point where they cut out a bunch of stuff that would have had to have happened, and wasn't throwaway stuff, but if they had put it in, it would have been too long for the runtime, and I think that really hurt the storytelling a lot. The only good part about this whole episode was the conversation between Buffy and Dawn at the end. Unfortunately, we had to wait until the end, and it was only 1 minute out of 45. The demon guy said that if anything goes wrong, destroy the image of Joyce. But I assumed that meant that the body would just become dead again. From a fable standpoint, having no one be at the door worked. But from a realistic standpoint, Joyce's corpse would be collapsed on the front step and decomposing, which would have been pretty traumatic and horrific all over again.
Yeah, I had that question too.
And aside from the fact that Giles sells real magic stuff to the general public, he doesn't even keep the really dangerous stuff behind a locked door? What an idiot! This episode did everything I hoped it would not do, and then some. Pretty much a complete failure on every level, and a real disappointment as a follow-up to such a good episode. I gave this one a D. You're typing a lot for just, I agree.
I disagree. I gave this episode a B+.
So you thought this episode was better than The Body?
I did.
Wow.
2 good episodes in a row for me. I was shocked.
Okay, you gotta give me your rationale for this being a good episode, let alone better than the one before.
I'm about to try. I did think the previous episode was shot more interestingly, but I thought the character writing generally felt more believable in this one, aside from Willow and that one really bad scene with Willow and Tara. Willow's behavior in general was pretty nonsensical in this episode. If she wanted to give Dawn a chance with the resurrection spell, why wouldn't she be directly involved to try to make sure that it went the way it was supposed to? Why would she just give her a random book and say, you know what, do whatever you want? And all the characters had to act pretty stupid for Dawn to be able to do what she did. Nobody stopped her along the way. Nobody caught on to what she was doing. Nobody said, hey, we still need to watch Dawn because of Glory and everything. But I'm glad they devoted another full episode to dealing with Joyce's death, but without completely ignoring Glory this time, although that part of the show still mostly raises a lot of questions. Buffy was barely in this episode after the first half, which was interesting, but by the end, we did get closure for both her and Dawn, which I thought was great, and I thought that really worked. And before anyone puts it in the comments, this episode was obviously inspired by the monkey's paw, and inspired isn't even a strong enough word because it's literally the same thing, but I thought that really worked too. I liked that they still had Dawn go through with the spell and bring Joyce back, and then went back to cancel it out. Instead of what I thought would happen was they would convince her that it wasn't the right thing to do or whatever, and she would finally relent and say, okay. I was glad they actually had her bring her back. And that made me wonder what's happening with Joyce in like the afterlife or whatever. Is that screwing up whatever happened with her?
Now see, it's kind of sad how that character Joyce has become more interesting now that she's dead. Because they ignored her for so much before.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, this entire season, really the only thing that she had was, oh, I have cancer. And then now it's, oh, I'm dead. Given that they are killing her off, they should have done more with her and Buffy and Dawn kind of leading up to this. But I thought they've handled her death well over 2 episodes now. I really appreciate that it's not something that they just kind of got past and were like, alright, on to more dumb stuff, even though you felt like they did in this episode. I get what you're saying, and I mean, I did think the first half of the episode wasn't great, but the stuff with Dawn and Buffy in the second half really pulled it up a lot for me, and that's why I went as high as I did.
Above the body.
Yes.
I think people are going to be very upset with you.
Yeah, I do too.
But hey, you can have your own opinion. That's what YouTube is for, right?
Sure. I was waiting for you to say even if it's the wrong opinion or something like that.
No, that's something you would say.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, let us know what you guys think. Did you think this episode sucked? Did you think it was a good follow-up to The Body?
You just opened the floodgates when you said, let us know what you think, because they're all just
Yeah,
going to pounce on you.
I mean, it's not like we're going to read the comments anyway. We just heart random ones. So. No, that is not true. We try to read all the comments. So I felt the way this episode ended was a good wrap-up of this whole thing. So if they don't go back to it again, I think that works with how it ended here.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Which means they should be getting back to Glory in the next episode, because she was in this episode, but she hasn't really done anything in the past at least 3 episodes, because the one before The Body was the one with the robot. And I can't remember, maybe she wasn't even the one before that. I don't remember what was before that. But hopefully we'll get back to that. Hopefully it'll pick up the way I feel like these past couple episodes have been better. Hopefully that'll get better too.